Hi friends, I'm Isa, and today I'm going to be making a painting inspired by this ColourPop So Fly eyeshadow palette. It seems like people are getting more creative and colorful with their eyeshadow every day, and moving away from barely there neutrals. As a painter, I love seeing people find their creative outlet, but I'm not really a person who wears a ton of makeup, so I don't own a giant rainbow of eyeshadow colors. I have 2 palettes, both of which have 9 colors, and I wondered if I could make a painting inspired by my palette. After all, they're just a bunch of colors curated to go together. I've seen some people do the trend of actually painting with their eyeshadow, but because I don't have a ton of colors, I didn't really want to use it for that purpose, so this is my own take on that trend. I chose to use this palette because my friend gave it to me and the colors were closer to my usual choice for painting. Plus, the theme is dragonflies, and I love them, so how could I resist? Today, I'm going to try to design a character based off of this palette. The colors are quite sparkly, but I don't own any metallic paints. The closest thing I have is this set of Daniel Smith Primatek colors, which I haven't used much. I swatched them out, and the only one that really has any shimmer is the Amethyst Genuine, but there wasn't any purple in the palette, so I decided to use this hot pink color, which is Rhodonite Genuine, instead, because I really just wanted an excuse to use these paints. They're supposed to be made of minerals, but I didn't really notice a difference. It seems like the selling point is that they just aren't synthetic. I'll make a full review of them later. The other paints I'm using here are also Daniel Smith from their Essentials set. Dragonflies mainly symbolize change, transformation, adaptability, and self-realization, which is a theme I've been leaning towards lately. Besides the obvious changes, meaning a new chapter of turning 18 and going out into the world, I also feel like I've been developing a lot as a person in the past year. I'm learning to love myself and be present with my body. I'm learning to care for my inner child and be aware of my thoughts and sensations, which can sometimes be scary and uncomfortable, but I'm trying to be cognizant of my world. I don't want to let my life slip by. When I notice that sunshine makes me happy, I take a few more moments to appreciate it and try to carry that feeling with me. I'm also trying to notice when I feel down or anxious and why, and just sit with that feeling or figure out what may have caused it and try to work through it instead of avoiding it. Given all of that, I was excited to incorporate some dragonflies into my art, but I'm primarily a portrait artist, and I'm generally just drawn to the human body and face as a means of expression because I love nourishing the connection between humans. However, I'm trying to incorporate more intentional elements into my art this year as opposed to just a portrait with a solid color or abstract wet-on-wet background. So instead of just painting a dragonfly with these colors, I went for a dragonfly person. Really just a person with dragonfly-inspired wings and a few dragonfly tattoos. I painted the tattoos with this blue color because it's kind of the statement of the eyeshadow palette, which is mostly warm pinks, yellows, and browns. I didn't want the whole piece to read as blue, I wanted it to read as warm pinks and yellows with a pop of blue. It was quite difficult not to mix the blue with the pink and yellow to create purples and greens, especially when I was working wet on wet. In a few places, I slipped a bit too far towards those colors, which made the overall color story less clear. The main challenge with this piece was keeping the color story cohesive and readable. I wanted to incorporate the swirls and energy of the art on the front of the palette, but I struggled to maintain the shapes I initially painted because I didn't have enough pigment on my brush, so I had to make multiple layers. Because watercolor is transparent, it's hard to have clear, solid shapes unless you plan for them, and I'm quite impatient sometimes, so of course I didn't plan. So the final piece is a bit messy, but I'm honestly okay with that because this was just meant to be a fun little challenge and a quick painting. I'm pretty happy with the overall outcome because this was supposed to be a character inspired by the palette. Initially I was going to try to use more of the actual colors of the palette, but I think this piece captures the overall feeling of it better than using exact color matches. I love how bright, expressive, and confident the final piece feels, and I think that's the overall feeling of the palette. When I'm wearing these shades, they feel quite bright because I'm not used to wearing a ton of eyeshadow, and I feel confident and fun. This year, I'm going to try to reflect more on my paintings, so here's a new little section that I'll hopefully continue in other videos. This is the section where I talk about what I learned. Yay, learning! First up, I learned a lot about painting darker skin tones. I'll be honest, I've been scared of painting darker skin tones because it's hard to build up color without muddying it in watercolor. I think starting with the pink underpainting helped a lot to reach the final value, and I tried to be patient and let each layer dry to prevent blooms and runs. Skin has a lot of different colors in it, so by intentionally layering a lot of different colors, I achieved a final result that feels more full than just mixing one tone for the skin and darkening or lightening it based on the shadows. The main tip I have is to be patient. As you could probably see, I could have stopped anywhere in the painting process and her skin would have looked semi-realistic. To achieve darker tones, you have to patiently layer the paint because you have to obscure more of the white of the paper. I would advise against starting with an extremely saturated mix of paint. The layers are how you achieve the richness of the skin without it looking flat. But if you're going for a more flat, almost cartoony look, then it's probably best to start with a more saturated mix and have 1 or 2 layers. I also got more comfortable with hot press paper. I typically lean towards cold press paper because it's easier for me to blend out color without it running and blooming. That happened a few times in this painting and I had to learn to deal with it and flow with the mistakes. I wanted this to be a quick painting, so I went with my smaller block of paper, which happens to be hot press. This is a 7 by 10 inch block. I definitely learned to appreciate the detail that you can get with hot press. For those who are unfamiliar with the difference, cold press tends to have more texture than hot press does. Typically, paintings with lots of loose, expressive marks like watercolor florals will be cold press, and more illustrative, detailed pieces will be hot press, but it really comes down to the artist's preference. Even though I lean more towards the illustrative, detailed side, I still prefer cold press for most of my paintings because I'm just more comfortable using it. For a small painting like this, the texture might get in the way of the details in the face because my brush might catch on the paper or might distract from the detail, so hot press in the end turned out to be a better choice for this painting. I think it's good for watercolor artists to try out both types of paper to determine which one they like more. Really, I chose the hot press because I had a smaller block of paper than I did for cold press, and I didn't want this to be a multi-week endeavor. Overall, I'm so happy with the final result. I think she really captures the spirit of the palette, and this was a fun challenge to break out of my art block. If you try this out, I'd love to see it. And if you'd like to see more paintings of fairies, I highly recommend that you check out this video where I painted postcards from Fairyland, or this one where I painted a scene from a Studio Ghibli movie. I hope your adventures in the world of fairies and borrowers are as fun as mine were, and I will see you when I see you. Bye!